Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to Movie Goodness here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed, and we have reached the month of February in the year of our Lord 2026. And of course, we all know that February is Black History Month. And every year I do a Black History episode on Movie Goodness and here on the KB Radio Network, and I take great pride into doing that. I know Black History Month is kind of iffy around the country when it comes to the teachings of Black history and celebrations of Black history, but we we're not those people. We are going to dive into Black history and not the gloom and doom version of Black history. I hate, well, I shouldn't say hate because it is important to learn about the doom and gloom portions of our history, but I can't stand that that's all we hear about. All you hear about is Martin Luther King. All you hear about is Malcolm X. All you hear about is the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s and so on. All that's fine and good, but there's more history to Black history. There's Black history being made every single day. And this year in 2026 marks the 100th year that we are celebrating Black History Month. February of 1926 was the first commemoration of Black history. And now back then in 1926, it was Negro History Week. And that was brought to us and launched by the great Carter G. Woodson, who spearheaded and launched this phenomenon, this commemorative event that takes place every year. And I've heard the argument, and this from Black people, this from my own people. I've heard the argument that, oh, why we get a Black History Month, or why do they get a Black History Month? You don't get White History Month and stuff like that. Okay, that's their business. They got 11 other months to celebrate. But we got a month, and we should take this time to commemorate all that has been before us, all that has happened before us, I should say, and celebrate it. And this is the theme of the 2026 Black History Month. Every year has a theme. This year is a century of Black history commemoration. And we should look back not just on one era of time, all the eras of time that African American or blacks have made an impact, not just in the United States, but around the world as well. Just a little history about Carter G. Woodson. He was born in 1875 in Virginia. He is a historian, or was a historian, an author, a journalist, and he was the founder of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. He is a founder of the Journal of Negro History, which was first published in 1916. He has been called the father of Black history. Carter G. Woodson, he devoted his life to historical research. He worked to preserve the history of African Americans and accumulate a collection of thousands of artifacts and publications. He noted that African American contributions were overlooked, ignored, and even suppressed by the writers of historical textbooks and the teachers who used them. Now, this was 100 years ago, and I like to say that hasn't changed. Well, I don't like to say it. Let me rephrase that. Sadly, that has not changed. It's still being suppressed by the powers that be. If you don't believe me, watch the news, man. I mean, you can't even teach certain subjects in school, the critical race theory and all this here. They want to rip all that out of the schools. You have a president who's taken down monuments that acknowledge the fact that former presidents owned slaves and stuff like that. That's that's ripping away history. This is something that Carter G. Woodson fought to preserve. And sadly, here we go 100 years later, and we are sitting back and allowing it to happen again. We're falling right back into that trap. And it's sad, man, because I'm thinking about well, not so much my kids, 'cause my kids have graduated college and all this other good stuff. They're pretty much grown women now, which they love to remind me of these days. But I'm thinking to my grandchildren whenever that come along, way down the line, and nieces and nephews, little nieces and great nieces and nephews that I have who are in school, who are learning or not learning about this stuff. And it hurts me. It hurts me to think about that there will be a generation after we're dead and gone, I'm dead and gone, and that will have no clue what took place generations before. It's sad to say that I, I, I was, what, 40, maybe just turned 40, late 30s, I don't know. But it wasn't too long ago that it really dawned on me how close, how how little time has passed since slavery, since oppression on blacks, the segregation and all of this stuff. It didn't really dawn on me. And it's sad because my father, my mother, they taught me all this stuff because they went through it. My parents grew up in Mississippi. They were born and raised in Mississippi during the time of segregation and all this here. Literally, my parents grew up on a plantation. No lie. they lived on a plantation, and not in a big house. And so it was that close. My great grandparents and grandparents were slaves. And so it was that close of time. And the way it's taught in school, like it was centuries ago, like it was in the time of Noah. And like you have to launch an archaeological dig to find evidence of slavery. No, I don't. I can go to a family reunion and see that. It's that close. And that's the part that infuriates me, that infuriates millions of other black Americans who have to hear, oh, we need to get over it. How? How can you get over something that just took place and that you haven't even apologized for? That's the part that gets me. And then even closer, when we talk about the Jim Crow era, when we talk about the civil rights movement, that was literally 60 years ago or whatever. It was that close. So the thought of them erasing that from history, from something that people literally are still alive who lived through that, and trying to erase it from the history books, is the most mind-boggling thing. And what's even more mind-boggling is the fact that we are just sitting back and allowing it to happen. And this little platform that I have that isn't nothing, but it's something. I'm dedicating my life to speak on stuff like this, because it needs to be spoken on. And I do live in a bubble. So I'm not out in the world, and I don't hear every little thing, know every little thing, but I don't hear the uproar as much as I hear the uproar about other issues that I feel are a bit trivial. And from my standpoint, I know everybody's gripe is greater depending on those who are griping about it. But this is a serious thing, because not only is the issue of what we all went through as Black Americans historically in this country bad and not being taught, it's the fact that to an extent we're still going through it. The system found a way to legally do it, to legally keep you down. Now, I know I wasn't going to, I know I said we weren't going to go doom and gloom, but I'm getting to a point here. The point is, the whole purpose of Black History Month is to learn the history. And history unlearned is history repeated. It's not just a saying, it's not just a motto, it's the truth. And so we need to learn our history. We need to actually do research. We need to look back. Those of us who still have grandparents who are still alive, we need to sit down and talk to them and ask them what they went through when they were our age or younger, when they were children, and so on and so forth. Pick their brains, find out hey, did you experience X, Y, and Z? Did you have to go through this? Did you have to come in through the back, sit in the back of the bus, or do this and do that? Learn that so you can take that bit of knowledge. You probably can't apply it to your daily living, but you can spread that knowledge and help this young generation who has absolutely no clue on what took place 20 minutes ago, let alone 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. So the point I'm trying to make, we need to teach our children. If the schools refuse to do it, if the government is not allowing the schools to do it, it's up to the parents, it's up to the grandparents, it's up to the uncles and the aunties and friends and loved ones to do it. And so I say all that to say this. Today on Movie Goodness, as we celebrate Black History Month, we're going to move away from the dark side of the history, and we're going to talk about an uplifting portion of Black history. Black Americans have, like I said before, contribute blood, sweat, and tears to this country to help build this country. This country wouldn't be where it's at if it wasn't for Black Americans. If you think in the aspect of what Black people have brought to the table here, what we've invented, all of the systems that Black Americans have put in place that were ripped from us and stolen to make it look like the other side came up with that idea, or that for example, the welfare system, the WIC, and all this here. You think the government came up with that? No, that was not the government that came up with that. It was actually the Black Panther Party that came up with that. They had a system going, hence why the government wanted to shut them down. It wasn't because they were walking around with guns and all this here. Now that played a part, but that wasn't the main reason. They wanted the ideas. They wanted to strip them of that power, and they did. They took it for themselves. But it's one thing. There's one thing, as far as cinematically, that Black Americans did that white Americans just could not do, or other ethnicities just could not do. And that was corner the market in one era of time with one genre of film that just took the world by storm, and still to this day is talked about as one of the greatest eras in film history. And that is Blaxploitation films. Blaxploitation cinema is something of a subgenre of exploitation cinema, and it was fundamentally comprised of independently produced low budget B-level films or grindhouse films of the 1960s and 70s that these films typically revolved around violence and taboo subjects that you didn't find in mainstream cinema around that time, and are engineered specifically to attract an audience through sensation and controversy. It was aimed at a particular audience, and it hit with that particular audience. Blaxploitation films featured Black actors in the leads that you didn't see. It's hard to find them now. You can count on one hand. I'm gonna challenge you here. This is your homework. Count to me on one hand how many leading black actors are in Hollywood. Uh, you might get to the second hand, and it's gonna be hard, but it's you might get to the second hand. I'm gonna help you out. You got Denzel, you got Michael B. Jordan, Idris Elba, maybe, and I don't know after that. I don't, and I'm talking leads. Yes, there have been black actors to lead films. They are currently leading films, but I'm talking on a big blockbuster box office studio backed film. Can you name them? There's not that many, and it's not because of lack of talent, because there are a lot of talented black actors out there. It's just that the opportunities, the material isn't there. There's not enough uh 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 franchise films, I guess, and I guess I got to go that route because that's the big thing these days are franchise films, and you don't have too many. The only one we had was Black Panther, and Black Panther took the world by storm, as it should. And what happened? The lead star passed away untimely, and that was that for that. Now they're going to still continue. They're probably going to recast, but I mean, look how hard it is to recast. When have you heard anybody cast as Black Panther? There are rumors, but nothing defiant. And even with those rumors, and we're going to get back to the subject, but even with those rumors of Black Panther, a new Black Panther, the list is small. The reason the list is small because there's not that many black actors that Hollywood trusts to be the lead. I would imagine it was tough to go with Chadwick Boseman because he was kind of lesser known. He popped up in some things. He was Jackie Robinson in 42. He was oh my God, he was James Brown in that James Brown biopic. But that's about it. Nothing that really took the world by storm. And so I know it was probably a tough sell for Chadwick Boseman, but that ended up being the perfect, and I mean absolute perfect casting. R.I.P. to a king. Anyways, back to the Blaxploitation films. Yeah, they featured black actors in the lead, typically centered around African Americans overcoming oppression, overcoming antagonistic forces, just to put it kindly, or generally just to put it plainly, generally it was white authority figures as the villain, and they were often referred to none other than the man uh, in those movies. Now, more often than not, the protagonists in Blaxploitation films were outlined as stereotypical character characterizations, such as pimps, pushers, prostitutes, or I think the highest ranking you probably got was a bounty hunter. But at its core, it promoted a message of black empowerment. It wasn't about, glorifying violence, which, you know, a lot of people point to Boys in the Hood, Menace to Society, films of that ilk of promoting violence, which I don't look at it like that. I look at those films as telling a story of what's going on. It's what's actually happening in black communities. But the rest of the world took it as, oh, they're promoting violence and drive-by shootings and this, that, and the third. That wasn't the perfect purpose of those films. But the term blaxploitation was coined by Julius Griffin, and at the time, he was the head of the LA NAACP. And so he coined it blaxploitation in the early 70s as a criticism for the less than positive image of African Americans depicted in the genre. And his influence would later contribute to its demise. However, not everyone in the black community agreed with the NAACP's assessment. Despite the genre's potential to reinforce negative stereotypes, a large majority of the black community considered blaxploitation cinema as a sign of progress. And this is where this is where you kind of get upset with people in the community who, instead of celebrating, looking at the positive, they go to the negative and just harp on it. Yeah, I get it. There were pimps, players, and hustlers all throughout those films. But did you get the message? Did you understand what the movies were about? Did you get the point that these were black filmmakers with black actors independently funded these films and showing that Hollywood may not cast these people, but we're still going to find a way to get on the screen. We're going to find a way to impact the community positively, might I add. And it's positive because you're not looking at a pimp, player, or hustler on the screen. You're looking at a black person up there. You know, as a black man, that's when I was a kid. Now I wasn't old enough or born. I wasn't born when these movies came out. I came a few years later. I just missed the boom, but I did watch these movies uh, later on when we were blessed with a VCR, and my dad used to watch these films, and I would watch them with him. And I was so amazed by it because around that time, all you saw was white folks. You saw black people. Black people. A black man was either the sidekick or the whatever, or he was a pimp, or a drug dealer or the bad guy. You didn't see a black as a lead. So to see movies like this, I was like, what is this? this is this from a different dimension? What are these movies? And it just encouraged me. It helped me fall in love with those type of movies and movies in general. I was already in love with film, but that just made me feel like, oh, if I ever go this route, there is a path. There's a path for me. Now, life got in the way, and that path didn't really take me that way. But I'm still happy that I was able to watch these movies and enjoy these movies for what they were. Now, getting into the creation of this genre, it all started in the 60s. Now, in the 60s, we all know, as I mentioned earlier, it wasn't the best of times for race relations in this country. But it was also that way in Hollywood. It was there was an insurgence of television around that time and a rapid decline in popularity to musicals, which was a big genre in film around that era as well. And the film industry was bleeding out and facing pretty much bankruptcy around that point. And with the proud proclamation of Black Power becoming progressive more audibly throughout the country, it became impossible for Hollywood to ignore black society, making it easier for black filmmakers and actors to begin to kind of penetrate the system. And so amongst the first of these filmmakers was Melvin Van Peebles, and he lit the match that would ignite the blaxploitation subgenre with his independently funded Sweetback's Badass Song, which he wrote, he directed, he produced, he edited, and starred in. And in addition, with composing the score for that film. And so upon the film's release in April of 1971, it blew black audiences' mind with its proclamation depicting a black man fighting against the system and actually winning. And so prior to Sweetback, there has never been a film where a black man running from the police got away. And so the film made a justifiable splash within the black community. It managed to gross $15 million despite having an X rating. It had an X rating. It wasn't even R. but they gave it a straight up X, and there's reasons for it. But the reason for one of the reasons is because of the sexual nature, which Van Peebles turned into a positive for the film's rated X by an all white jury tagline, mind you. With Sweetback, Van Peebles laid the framework for Blaxploitation genre and gave Hollywood the formula that would prove to be the deliverance from ruin. So, if Van Peebles was the match that sparked and ignited the Blaxploitation movement, Gordon Parks' Shaft was the fuse that lit the dynamite. Shaft is Shaft is arguably the most well known of the Blaxploitation films, and a film that's still referenced today. I don't care. I don't care how old or young you are. You know who Shaft is. You know about Shaft. He's a bad mother. Well, shut your mouth. You know who Shaft is, man. And so the film, it was released by MGM only a few short months after Sweetback's surprise success, might I add. It was a Hail Mary toss for the once reputable studio that gave us such classics as The Wizard of Oz. It also MGM also gave us Gone with the Wind. But Shaft couldn't been the last nail in the coffin for MGM, but the film single-handedly liberated the studio from the looming threat of liquidation. The iconic theme from from the movie, even earned Isaac Hayes an Academy Award, and the name Shaft became commonplace. Shaft gave audiences a more commercially accessible brand of blaxploitation, one that boosted a catchy, energetic score, a hip hero, a depiction of urban life that was previously unseen in Hollywood films. It also proved to Hollywood that black directors can be just as successful inside of the Hollywood system. You know, it's the same thing that I was discussing with black actors, black filmmakers as well. We, black filmmakers weren't making movies. They weren't in the mainstream. And so Gordon Parks, if it wasn't for Gordon Parks, we wouldn't have Spike Lee. We wouldn't have John Singleton, God rest his soul. We wouldn't have Ryan Coogler. These filmmakers are running because Gordon Parks walked. And it all stems from this era of time in film. Both Shaft and Sweetback marked a turning point in these type of films. It gave rise to a demand in Hollywood just that they haven't seen before. In following the release of Shaft and Sweetback, another blaxploitation feature would surface and rise to the same iconic status as those predecessors, the independently funded Superfly. And it was backed by Curtis Mayfield's soulful soundtrack, which I remember listening to. My dad had the vinyl. I remember listening to that. I hate Hurricane Katrina. I hate it with my soul because Hurricane Katrina took all of those records, all of those vinyl records my dad had. Oh my God. And this was one of them, Superfly. And it took the depiction of urban life to an all-time extreme because the protagonist in this film was a coke dealer. He was a cocaine dealer trying to score one last big deal before retiring from the life of crime. The film further troubled the NAACP as it depicted its hero as the richest, most respected man in the neighborhood. But the reality is, that's how it was, and it still is in a lot of senses. Depending on what neighborhood you go in, the richest, most respected person in certain neighborhoods is a crook. I mean, the richest, most respected person in this country sits in the White House, but I digress. By 1976, Nearly 200 blaxploitation features have been produced, rather being independently funded or Hollywood backed. However, regardless of the film's financiers or action and gratuitous sex and violence, the dynamic of white versus black always was at the core of the genre, and it remained a defining element. And so the secret to the blaxploitation sauce was also its musical uh, counterparts. I mentioned Isaac Hayes' Academy Award winning score for Shaft and Curtis Mayfield's score for Superfly, just to name a few, which added depth into these films. It just added a different element, and that's what a score is supposed to do. But it was sometimes the score was the biggest star of those films. uh, Throughout the years, the blaxploitation genre succeeded in creating its own stars. For example, you have Pam Grier, uh, uh, Ruby Ray Moore, Dolomite himself. You have Fred the Hammer Williamson. However, as the years wore on, the genre began to flounder for new ideas and pondered any available genre to keep afloat. This gave rise to horror, and that was a different element to this genre. Instead of going with the action, we got films like Blackula, Blackenstein. you know, I remember watching Blackula. Oh my God, how old was I? That's when I was first getting into horror, and I was like, "Oh, a Black Dracula. This should be interesting." And yes, it was very interesting. I didn't see that. I have never seen Blackenstein, but I would love to find that and find that and watch it just for giggles, man. Um, you also got gangster variations. You got films like Black Caesar. You also got black westerns. You got kung fu films, among others. They tried to switch it up a lot in blaxploitation. It was nothing was off limits. Nothing was off limits. That's what made it so awesome. You also had comedies as well. Now, the blaxploitation genre may have dried up in the 80s, but the lasting impression of the genre left young filmmakers who would spawn a revelation that we still seeing today. I mentioned earlier, you had Spike Lee do the right thing. You had John Singleton's Boys in the Hood, which also focused on urban life of young black Americans. However, this was a new wave of black filmmakers and not a mere regurgitation, if you will, of the typical blaxploitation plots. These films that emerged in the late 80s and early 90s would incorporate elements common to blaxploitation genre while simultaneously blending the criticisms of the genres, glorifying uh, criminal behavior, if you will. Perhaps the biggest contributing factor to the revelation of the genre would come in films of Quentin Tarantino. You see, a lot of folks don't realize that if it wasn't for blaxploitation films, we wouldn't have Quentin Tarantino. And if you want an shining example of what, if you never seen not one blaxploitation film, and you want to watch a modern movie, a more up-to-date film, watch a Quentin Tarantino film. In Pacific, watch Jackie Brown. That's pretty much a blaxploitation film. All of his films, are heavily influenced by blaxploitation, and he'll tell you himself. You know, he has not shied away from giving credit to blaxploitation films as being a big influential part of his life or career, I should say. Now, a few more blaxploitation films appeared in the early 2000s. Uh, most of them parodies, you know, such as Pootie Tang, Undercover Brother, Black Dynamite. I love Black Dynamite. And then you got the reboot of Shaft, which was, my God, man. The John Singleton one was all right, but after that, it just went downhill. But yeah, they tried to make it was more of a novelty thing. It was a joke thing, to poke fun at blaxploitation. Another one that kind of pokes fun at it, but in a good way, is I'm Gonna Get You Sucker. I'm Gonna Get the Ken Ivory Wayans film from was it the 90s? I can't remember what year it came out, but I almost reviewed that film, but I didn't watch it, and I wanted to have a fresh look at it because it's been a couple of years since I seen I'm Gonna Get You Sucker, so I didn't review it, but I still remember. I remember it to this day. It is one of my favorite comedies of all time. It it is a blaxploitation parody, yet is perfect. It's everything that a blaxploitation film has to offer. But anywho's, that was kind of the rundown in the history of blaxploitation films. The genre continues to uh, uh, be alive and kicking today, and will likely continue to be strong and considered as a very popular genre. You look in comic books, look at Luke Cage. Luke Cage is blaxploitation. That is that is the Marvel Comics version of blaxploitation. It is awesome, man. You had you had a remake not too long ago of Superfly, and I I struggled to get through it. Actually, I don't even remember anything about that movie. I remember sitting down and watching it, but I don't remember anything. I didn't take anything with me from that film. Um, another film that I forgot to mention that is an extension of blaxploitation films that came out in 1988. It was Jackson, if I could talk. And that is the uh, I guess you could say 80s version, late 80s version of blaxploitation. Same concept, just with 80s style action. A bigger budget, if you will. We call Weathers, God rest his soul. And so, yeah, there are still elements of blaxploitation still in cinema today. It's a subgenre that I would love to see resurrected in some shape, form, or fashion. I know this is 2026, and I know people's sensibilities and sensitivity is on an all-time high. Every little thing is offensive to every little body, and it's no way you can make movies about the black man rising up against the white. They already feel that way. The white folks, that what they call it, the great replacement theory or whatever I don't know what that crap is. Oh, anyways, is no way you can get away with this unless you do it independently and like they did, started in the 60s. But uh, these were good movies, man. And it wasn't about overpowering the white man and taking over for the white man. It's all about them just wanting to live their lives. At the core of it, leave us alone. That was the basis of these movies. Just leave us alone and just let us live our life. You know, it was such fun watching these movies. Yeah, there was some deep subject matter. There was some heavy issues that they were tackling in some of these movies, but it was more of a depiction of the time. It was a mirror or a telescope into the black neighborhoods, the ghettos, the hoods, and showing what's really going on, heightened level, but what's going on in the black community and how we were feeling at the time as a black community. You know, We felt that the man was holding us down. And these films were about pushing back, fighting back, and coming to power. And it was more of a system instead of one singular person that the film depicts. You couldn't show a whole system fighting against them. You had to bottle it up to one individual, one antagonist, and it turned into the man. And so I, I still think these movies are important today. And I still think you can make some of these movies today. And now, do I think you should remake some of these? I don't think so. I don't think we tried that with Shaft and it didn't work. It didn't work. No need to remake them. It just, you know, uh, try something new. Try something different. There are always trust me, there are some stories in the black community that could be shown on the big screen and be entertaining in a sense, but still, tell the world what we are currently going through. Show the world what we are going through, what we're fighting against, and what we're up against as a community as a whole. But yes, Blaxploitation. If you have not watched Blaxploitation films and you were curious, if you're curious, I implore you to check them out. These aren't best quality, show them in IMAX type films. They're not that. The acting is spotty. Yes, the action is even more spotty. But that's what adds to the charm of it all. If you want to laugh, you want to get a good laugh, watch Dolomite. Watch how Ruby Ray Moore does kung fu in those movies. There's a film Eddie Murphy did. It's on Netflix. Eddie Murphy, Wesley Snipes, and he played Dolomite. It was the story of Dolomite and the making of that film and whatnot. If you watch that, you'll get a deeper appreciation for these films and what they had to do to make these movies and how they had to make them. And basically, they were put together with duct tape and spit and bubble gum. That was how these movies were made. And somehow you got a story out of it, an entertaining story out of these films. And all of them, to a degree, or most of them, I didn't say all of them, because some of them did have backing of studios, but for the most part, you had independently owned or funded films, and they did the best they could with what they had. But I implore you to check out these films. You know, Foxy Brown, Cleopatra Jones, uh, uh, what was the one with Isaac Hayes? He even starred in. He starred in them. You know, he not only did he compose, he starred him. Was it Trucker? Uh, Man, I can't think of the name of it. Why is this escaping my head? It was just there. I should have mentioned it when I when I thought of it earlier. But anywho's, yeah, watch these movies. You know, Dolomite and Shaft and Superfly and yeah. Oh my God, man, the list goes on and on. And if you're in a scary horror movie, watch Blackula. These are some good films, man. Check them out and continue to celebrate and learn the history of Black history. And don't just stick to one era in time. Go through the entire history of Black history because there were some phenomenal moments throughout Black history for the century that we've been celebrating, and beyond that, even before all that, and still to this day, I think about a film like Sinners. I think Sinners can be constituted as an uh big budget Blaxploitation film. Actually, yeah. Now that I think about it, that Sinners is the most up to date Blaxploitation film. Uh, but look at what it did at the Academy Award nominations. It broke the record. 16. 16 nominations. I don't know how many of those it's going to win. Is it going to win Best Picture or not? I don't know. It was Best Picture in my eyes from 2025, but you know, there were some other good films, one battle after another and all this here, which can also be considered a Blaxploitation film. Man, When you really sit down and think about it, Blaxploitation, man, it is back in a way. I've been crying for it to come back. It is back in a way. Two of our best picture nominees at the Academy Awards this year are Blaxploitation films. One does have an African American director, the other doesn't. Paul Thomas Anderson for One Battle After Another, but that is a Blaxploitation film. And so the influence is still there and is still prevalent in cinema. I would like to know, are you a big fan of this genre of film? Did you enjoy watching these movies? And which one was your favorite? Which one you enjoy more? What's your go-to in the Blaxploitation genre? Let me know. Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also search for the show on all social media platforms. Just search for the KB Radio Network. Also, don't forget about YouTube, ladies and gentlemen. Subscribe to the KB Radio Network channel and like this video if you don't mind. Don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to movie goodness here on the KB Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for joining me for this Black History Month edition of movie goodness as we explored the history of Blaxploitation films. I want you all to know that I love you. Continue to love everyone, and until we speak again, you all be blessed.